Wonderful. We've had a very full morning already, and now it is a particular highlight for me to introduce two very good friends of mine. I've known Father Joe Donnelly and Paul Butler for many years now, and you are in for a great treat when treat it to the way that they have worked together for the sake of their parish in Southbury, Connecticut. Paul Butler is the president of GlobalEdg, a leadership development consulting firm. Paul works with senior executives in organizations to increase capabilities of those individuals, of teams, and organizations. Paul has also assisted the Leadership Roundtable staff each year with our own strategic planning, so we know firsthand that his skills are invaluable. And in fact, he was introduced to the Leadership Roundtable by my good friend, Father Joe Donnelly. Father Joe is pastor of Sacred Heart Parish in Southbury, Connecticut. He is also chair of the board of directors of the St. Vincent de Paul Mission of Greater Waterbury, a social service agency under Catholic Charities, which operates the largest homeless shelter in Connecticut, as well as a soup kitchen, thrift store, mental health facilities, and housing for the working poor in Waterbury. He has served several roles for the Archdiocese of Hartford and as a spiritual director for many priests and others. He is the consummate priest and pastor. Paul and Father Joe will explain how their collaborative leadership model has strengthened Sacred Heart Parish. Then we'll have time for interaction. Gentlemen.
Thanks very much, Carrie. Okay, that's working. We're going to move around a little bit because notoriously the time section right after lunch is a tough time to play to the crowds. So we're going to try to keep moving. That's right.
It's
easier if you're walking around.
It's really about us.
We're real happy to be able to make this, take this opportunity to share our story, much as Archbishop Kurtz and Brian did this morning, much as the panel did, because there is so much fruitfulness that's coming from the work of the Leadership Roundtable and what they're bringing to this particular moment in the history of the church. What we're basically going to talk about is a little bit of a background to how we approach this idea of our strategic planning process, what the process was, and what are some of the results that we have. This is our parish, at least that's our parish church, and we're a suburban parish of about 2,200 households in the western part of Connecticut. Actually, Southbury abuts Sandy Hook, and we have about 25 families from Sandy Hook, many of 5 or 6 of whom had children in the school on that awful day a year ago and plus. So just to situate us on a map. I came to the parish about 11 years ago, and we immediately kind of dove into a few things, what I like to call big projects. We twinned with a parish in Haiti. We left CCD and went in favor of intergenerational catechesis, which we've been doing for about 7 or 8 years now. We tried to expand the staff. I followed a very talented and gifted guy who's a classmate of mine, and but he was a bit of a one-man show. One of the first things I did when I got to the parish was to go around and spend some time with each of the committees or groups or ministries that were doing different activity. And I kept getting the same refrain. I'd say, well, you know, tell me, how do you do this in this parish as I'm coming in? Let me know how you do it. Well, we do this, and we do this, and we do this. And then inadvertently they would say, but you're the pastor, Father, you can do what you want. I felt like after a while that should be the response to the prayer of the faithful on Sunday. You can do what you want, Father, you're the pastor. So there was a need to expand the leadership, and so we expanded the staff, which was one of the other big things that we did. But I came to the end of my first term and kind of was left with, okay, going into a second term, a second 6-year term, what now? What now? What are we going to do? And we saw on a couple of fronts, after some conversation that I had had with Paul. Paul had been on our parish council, and we kind of went round and round on that question and came up with the idea of, how about doing a strategic plan? Maybe we need to think strategically about these next years coming up and how we're going to approach continuing the mission and ministry of our parish. Parish council was a particularly appropriate place to think about how this was going to work, because that's really, in many ways, one of the most visible ways of involvement of different people in the parish in the work of the church. Now, to put it mildly, and I say this really respectfully, the church has wrestled with working collaboratively, and democracy is not our strong suit. And so pastors in parishes, and some of you who are pastors or even parishioners in different parishes might know that pastoral council and parish council and the various forms it's taken have been has not gone as smoothly as it might be. We're still looking for that model that works, that draws people in, that draws the energy of the community, that really taps into the many gifts that the Spirit has made possible there. Early on, you'd have a parish council, that, or sometimes called the Council of Ministries, right after this became a part of the church's life. And the various ministry heads or committee heads, you'd have the head of the education committee and the head of the liturgical committee and the head of this, that, and the other committee would come together each month and they'd talk with the pastor. Each committee would report on what they were doing, and then this group would also be in charge of the fundraising in the parish, keeping things motivated and going on. But the missing piece for this was, first of all, that became very boring after a while. And it became hard to keep people on this, because they could just read a memo if they wanted to. Why did they have to sit there and listen to somebody else, review what they're doing, and we tell you what we're doing? But the bigger flaw was there was no vision. There was nothing to move it forward. And so, in many ways, parishes turned to what then became known as, and I suppose these names are arbitrary, pastoral council. And a pastoral council would either elect representatives on the part of the parishioners, or we actually used a discernment model where we brought people together who were interested in being a part of it and have a facilitator there and go through several weeks of discernment, and they would discern who would be the members of the council. This group, when it came together, would brainstorm on various topics. We're all concerned about young people in the church and keeping young people in the church. How are we going to do that? Let's brainstorm that. And then the results would be sent to an appropriate parish committee. The faith formation committee might get it, or whatever. Evangelization committee would get the results of this brainstorming session. And so we did that for a while. There was an emphasis on prayer and consensus, always beginning with prayer and coming to a consensus model rather than voting on anything. But the flaw here was it had a large scope, the big picture, the brainstorming, but there was little accountability. How does, okay, we want to do thus and such for our young people. Who's going to run with that ball, and how are they going to be accountable then back to this group? This is my favorite slide in the whole thing. Now what? Faced with where we found ourselves, that's the big question that drew our conversation, and that's where Paul and I connected on a level of idea and operation. So,
you want to click for me?
Yeah.
Somebody mentioned the process and plan. I got a little story to tell you, and then I want to come back to the story at the end. Carrie, one of the things you did, you read my biography, but you left something off. It said my wife and I were empty nesters, but that was written 6 years ago. So we're not empty nesters anymore. We have 2 daughters who've come back home. Anybody had that happen? Okay. So I was walking through the house, and I said, a few weeks ago, I said, "What are you doing here, Dad?" And she goes, "I live here, Dad." And so I saw my younger daughter, and she was walking through the house. I said, "What are you doing here?" She goes, "I live here, Dad." And my wife said, "Don't worry. We give them their roots, but we want to give them their wings." My wife said, "Don't worry. Lindsay's come back to go to college. She's graduating this summer from graduate school. She'll be out in January. And Erin's getting married this summer, and she'll be out in July." So I started smiling. And then about 2 weeks ago, Erin came to me and said, "Dad, I know Brian and I are getting married in July, but our house is not going to be ready. So can we live with you for several months?" So we got a son-in-law is going to join us. The reason I tell that story, during that period where they were at home, they kind of came back to the church. And I think they came back to the church because of what we're doing locally. And a lot has to do with Father Joe and the story we'll tell. My daughter's playing violin in the choir right now. Father Joe's marrying my daughter next Friday. And she's interested in one of our ministries called Stephen's Ministry. So she came back, and I think I've convinced Katie to come at our parish and do an esteemed pilot. Okay? So welcome those empty nesters back home, Jim. Okay, so let me have this, please. We talked about the plan and the process. There's key words in each one of these. What we basically did, Father, you want to talk a little bit about how we chose this strategic planning committee before I even go in here?
Right. We, one of the things that we wanted to do was really to select people with skills who would come into this process not because they were the person who was best known in the parish or they had been there the longest or had name notoriety, but rather that they were a person because of their background or their interest could really bring something to the process. So we were very purposeful about who we drew on to these committees. We consulted widely, but really got a wonderful group of people to begin this process in that way.
So when we first brought them together, my planning world had been 25, 30 years in companies such as Procter & Gamble and Gillette, and that's where we had learned these skills. And when we started working with the Roundtable, we were able to fine-tune some of these and work on them. But there's three critical words in each one of these sentences up here, and this was the first chart we showed that group. The first one is choices. Strategies is about choices, what you choose to do and what you choose not to do. We wanted to make that clear. The second one was ongoing. We were in a pretty good place with our parish. Financially, we were known as a parish that people wanted to come to, somewhat engaged. So how do we really protect our finances and so for what we needed to do in the future? And the last one, there's two words, future and discipline. The process we use when we say with strategic planning, it can be as simple as what's going on, what do you recommend, and what will the results be? And we wanted the people to start thinking like that. So, choices, ongoing, future, and disciplines. One of the things that we used is to help inform our conversations. When I first met Carrie, I left corporate America and we started our own business. And I wanted to help out, and Father Joe says, I want to introduce you to a friend of mine, Carrie Robinson. And it's hard to say no to Carrie, as many of you know. So we've been working with the Roundtable, and what I've learned and what I would recommend to anybody is you follow the standards of excellence. If you're going to bring an outside group in to help, use that as your checklist. There's a lot of people out there that are doing some consulting work, but it's not grounded in what we believe is important. I had to learn how to speak the language of the church. It's been as much of an education for me. And also, I think we learned each way. So standards of excellence informed our work. Where's my clicker? Thank you. And I'm glad somebody was talking about the questions. Real quickly, what we said is you follow those three things, and here's what we needed to do when we first brought everybody together. I'm going to walk through this real quickly, and then I'm going to turn it over to Father Joe, and he'll tell the story of the results here. First of all, we said there's 5 principles. Challenge assumptions. What has always worked here may or may not be what we need to be thinking about. So we gave everybody on the team the ability to challenge assumptions. The next one is scope the few. We had a lot of stuff that we had to think about. So the question is, the scope is the parish. It's not your faith formation team. It's the parish and the surrounding communities. How big is our parish compared to in the community there? Are we the largest faith?
We're the largest faith community in Southbury, the only Catholic parish, although I feel it's kind of minute when I heard Father Ephraim talk about 9,000 households. But it is, yeah.
The other one was focus on the vital few. Focused and vital few. We're seeing more in our practice, 90-10 versus 80-20. What are the most important things this group needs to focus on? We had 55, 60 ministries, and we're all over the place up until this point. Focus on the vital few. Facts inform outcomes. When we started looking at some data, we basically said, we're a vibrant parish. Well, what does vibrant mean? We did an engagement survey so we could measure what we meant by vibrant. And then, what's the law of real estate? Location, location, location. What we had to do is connect the dots. Linkage, linkage, linkage. So if we had choices up here we were going to make, they had to be rooted in data upstream. And we checked that all the time. And we followed the questions. Who was talking about questions? What we've learned in our strategy work, the questions you ask or that need answers, a lot of times are much more important. And just being able to dialogue and work as a team to answer these questions were important. So you'll see everything from what do we know informs what's most important, what insights do we have, so what? We transition to what's our purpose and position, what do we aim to achieve, what choices do we make again, and did we win? And we've defined winning in a different way, you'll see later. And if you basically look at these, we did an internal and external analysis. We looked at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We, from there, informed the key issues that we needed to have. By the way, anybody, we'll get this presentation out to anybody with the notes. Key issues, what's going on, and by the way, we talked about the law of the vital few. It's not 30 or 40 key issues. We had a list when we first came out, a real abundant list of issues we needed to address. We say 5 to 7. And if you can get them down to 5, that's even better. But 5 to 7 key issues is where we needed to focus our energies. And by the way, this is a 3-year plan. We don't see 5-year plans in our business much anymore. We see 3-year plans that are rotating 3-year plans. So every year we take a look at our SWOT analysis, we take a look at our internal, external analysis, and we say, where are we? And then key issues, what are the things we need to solve for? And then we have what we call key issue sessions. This happened over about a 4 or 5 month period. And then what we did is we came up with some key issues, and I'm going to turn it back over to Father, that we brought a larger group in to help us. Are these the issues we should be focusing on?
And so the key issues were, first of all, evangelization, umbrella, but the engagement in a particular way of young people, young adults. The scope of our parish, we have a large 2,600 units of over 55 living in the town. So there's a lot of older retired people. But we also have loads of young families coming in and groups growing up. So we wanted to say, how can we keep and engage young people? That was one of the first ones. We noticed that there were lots of concerns that were out there. Families in crisis, we called it. How do we identify and address and support families in crisis? What do people have a right to look for from their parish community of faith when they face some kind of a particular difficult issue in their family life or their individual life? A new model of the church. Again, I think it's kind of a hackneyed reference, but you know, this is not the church that most of us grew up in. I think even in listening to Brian here today about Pope Francis, this is a whole different moment of grace. We need to be aware of that. Now, in leadership, we're pretty aware of it, but how do we make the larger community aware of it? How do we move people beyond, oh, I go to church, rather than I am the church? And so things like the role of the laity, a non-pastor-centric model, you're a pastor, Father, you can do what you want, a collaborative style of leadership, and the introduction, they had never had anything like pastoral associates, any kind of people in leadership who were not ordained. So we needed to get people more comfortable with that model. Human resources, how do we ensure and identify and prepare that we have the right human resources to meet the needs of our parishes, whether that's the structuring of the staff, the type of jobs we put our energy, our resources into, whatever. Communication, how do we promote and enhance the image of Sacred Heart and the Catholic Church as a positive force in our community and beyond? That one arm of evangelization is obviously, you know, nourishing faith in the people who are part of the community, but the other part of it is that public face that the church has. Both in a small town like ours, we only have like 19, 20,000 people in the town, or beyond that. People having all these bizarre ideas, you know, what do Catholics do? And certainly if they had to rely on just the secular media, they would have kind of a skewed image of that, I suspect. So how do we work that? Haiti. We have twinned with a parish in Haiti. We did that about 7 or 8 years ago, and we wanted to have it based on a matter of relationship, not just us doing things for those poor people in Haiti, but that they had something to bring to us. To the degree that we were able to enter into significant relationship with them, get to know them a bit, whether that be through going down there, or unfortunately they can't be brought here, but to bridge that gap was really, really important. Outreach. We had a lot of social outreach ministries going on. How do we continue those and keep them vibrant? You know, that they're not relying on the same handful of people and then it just kind of peters out. And finances. How do we pay for all this? You know, how do we keep all of it going and make it a vibrant community?
So we had these key issue meetings with the parish staff, and we invited people in to come weigh in. And for each key issue, we asked, so what? What's the implication? What should we be thinking about? And the key issues informed what we call our strategic options or our priorities. And originally we had a list of 10 to 15. We got it down to 7, where probably 2 of the 7 are what we call enabling priorities, finance and communication. So we have 5 core priorities and 2 enabling priorities. And what we did with those is what's feasible? What can we really implement? And a whole conversation of, if this is what's possible, what can we really do? Based on the talent we have, the resources we have, what have you. And just as important, what did we choose not to do? And Father's going to talk about a new way of doing parish council that's different on what we chose not to do, different than the past. Last thing is, how do we execute? And we're going to talk about that after he talks about the strategic priorities. By the way, in front of you, for later, there's a copy of more detailed key issues and implications that we gave out and worked with the key issue meetings. So you'll see that. So from the key issues, we had strategic choices, and we had to kind of execute on them.
And these are the priorities that we came up with once we honed down the key issues. Evangelization, this idea of today's church, people in crisis, social outreach, public relations, our commitment to the people of Haiti, and the financial stability to sustain all of this. Once again, the overall umbrella was, and the value that I personally found was the ability to think strategically, to be purposeful about what we do, as opposed to just kind of, you know, it's Lent again, do we have any ashes left over from last year or something like that, you know, and just doing the same old, same old. So these priorities are what we came up with. And then, because of them, a unique way, or a different way of structuring parish council, pastoral council. This is, I beg your pardon?
Were those 7 in an order?
No, they just were put together that way. One of our planning committee members, you know, who actually was a retired IBM exec, said, "Okay, I've seen people do this before. Now what are you going to do? Now what are you going to do?" Larry Bossity, who again was scheduled to speak here tomorrow, as this is a quote from his book Execution: "Strategies most often fail because they aren't executed well. Things that are supposed to happen don't happen." So that movement from, okay, these are our priorities, to, okay, what do we do with that, is an important step to make. We set up 7 teams, a team for each priority. Each team had a staff liaison or a sponsor, one of us on the pastoral staff, who would be the liaison with them and work with them, and then a team leader, who once again, we went and sought out people with background experience to draw into the ministry of the church. And in a particular way, I mean, one of the things I think that parishes sometimes suffer from is the same people doing the same things all the time. So to go out to somebody whom you've seen at Mass all the time, you see them coming there regularly committed to parish, but they've never come forth to do anything. How about inviting them rather directly to be, we need somebody of your skills, you know, to work with our evangelization group. Would you be willing to do that? Each team has about 4 or 5 people on it, in addition to the staff liaison and the team leader. And they meet throughout the year with a regularity and you know, work out, as you can see on the
There's a handout that really, in the back, that was Father Joe's initial letter to the parish on what's this all about, this strategic thinking thing, strategic planning thing.
So each of them had tasks that they had to do as they were continuing on with this. Paul, maybe you want to talk to this, huh?
One of the things we asked each team to do, which we thought was important, we had team membership, and team membership, like Father Joe said, we asked, by the way, the team leaders weren't the same people who were on the strategic planning committee. We dug deeper, and some of the people on the strategic planning committee stepped out and said, hey, I'm not the person to carry this on. So we asked people to step in. We had team membership, so each team was asked to fill out what we called a team charter. What was the team membership? What were the scope and objectives? Everything. By the way, we just used the financial stability team because this was one that touched every team, the financial stability. So you can see what their objectives were. They actually worked really closely with the Finance Council. We asked each team to give us some measurements. You don't have their exact measurements up here, but they did have measurements. And what are the interdependencies? This team happened to have, they touched all 7 teams. Some teams touch one team more than the other. So we had, what are their interdependencies? What were they focusing on short term, which was that calendar year, and over the course of the plan, 3 years. And they shared each one of these, and they showed up with these as we met about 3 or 4 times a year. So this was what we call an implementation snapshot. This is the latest one from May 31st, 2014. By the way, the plan was started in 2010. Up to the key issues was about 3-4 months, and then in the fall of 2010 into 2011, we finished the plan. And when we do it each year, we don't start over. We start from where we have and say, what's changed? What data is different than we had earlier in the year? What's the data telling us about our community, about our finances, what have you? So that's an implementation snapshot. Give you my mic.
No, that's okay. It's fine. The model that we came up for Parish Council, Pastoral Council, is something we've come to call Pastoral Advisory Council. Arose by any other name, you know. But what it's made up of is this. Myself as the pastor, we have 3 pastoral associates, and Paul as the facilitator. And then the chairs of each of the 7 priority teams. We meet about 3 times a year. The teams go on meeting all along through the year, but we try to just stay in touch with each other and once a year reassess the plan. How do we roll it forth into the next year? But what we found is the strategic plan offers us something to focus on. It's a future thing. It calls us to, not just to manage things or to do, repeat what we did last year, but really to move forward as best we can. I found it much more effective than either of the other models, which I've used in other parishes I've been stationed in. But it really was a real plus for me to kind of find, and to talking to other pastors, who have wrestled with this idea about what do you do with this parish council thing, which the church, unlike its attitude toward finance councils, which are mandated by canon law, does not mandate a parish council. It recommends it, it suggests it, but so it's still, there's not a real one model that would really work for all. Now, what are the results of all this? Here's some sample success stories, much as we heard some success stories in our initial meeting this morning. Out of all this, and again, it's even hard to just say that one action came out of the work of one team because of the interdependency, because of the interaction among the teams. But for instance, some of the concern that we had for young people, how do we engage young people? We initiated what we call Rock Mass, Rely on Christ. It's the first Saturday of every month at our Vigil Mass. We have found that we've been doing it for a little over a year. It's the most highly attended Mass of any Mass for the month. Now, if in your parishes, And again, given the population of our town, the Saturday Vigil Mass tends to be the Mass that a lot of retired people go to. They tend to go to that. So we were concerned we needed to do it in the evening because we thought that would be a better draw for any number of reasons. But would the retired members of our community take to it? Well, again, we get from the retired members of the community coming out, Father, why can't we have music like that all the time? You know, the drums and the bass and stuff like that, and they're kind of swaying to the music there as it's going on. They love it. We also know that for young people in a particular way, hands-on stuff, which they are invited to reflect on, is most helpful for them in understanding and appreciating you know, what their faith means. And so we have all sorts of different 5 major service projects that we do, outreach, especially outreach to the poor. We've initiated a young people's immersion trip to Haiti. Once a year, we have a group of our young people go down and minister in Haiti at our twin parish down there. Today's church has been trying to get people to talk about their faith, because we Catholics are notoriously shy. We don't talk about politics. We don't talk about religion. Can we get people to talk about their faith? Because when they talk about it, they're able to be reflective. They have to wrap words around what they believe. And that sometimes is a real challenge for people. So, for instance, we initiated what we call Sacred Heart to Hearts. Invited anybody in the parish, invite a dozen people into your house, have a pot of coffee going, and we have a little process that one of us from the pastoral staff would go and start the conversation off. What's your experience like of being a Catholic? Is your life better because you're Catholic? Let's start a conversation there and then spin it on from there. This summer, we're actually doing some thematic conversations because people have particular issues that are very controversial and oftentimes confusing. You know, again, Sandy Hook is right next door to us. You know, after Sandy Hook, I don't believe in God anymore. After the sexual abuse crisis, I don't believe in the church anymore. And that's a topic for the first thematic conversation. I raised my kids Catholic, none of them go to church anymore. I feel a failure as a parent. That's another one. I'm gay or my child is gay, and they don't feel welcome in your church. You know, put something like. So these thematic conversations of getting people talking, we're starting that this year. And Pastoral Care got us going on Stephen Ministry. I don't know if anybody here is familiar with Stephen Ministry. It actually comes out of a Protestant tradition, but we sent away a couple of people to one of our pastoral associates and another person, the Pastoral Care chair, to kind of learn this. They hold week-long training. And right now we have about 36 people who have trained for a whole year, listening and communication skills, and they reach out not just to parishioners, but also to non-parishioners, and to do just the listening. They're called the after people. After you get the pink slip, after your husband dies, after you get the diagnosis of terminal cancer, whatever it might be, that they have that. Others go on, you know, special workshops on, Paul actually facilitated a career transitions group, because that was such a big thing, especially in the economic crisis of recent times. We also decided, because of the communication and PR thing was such a big item, to actually hire someone to be the communications and information manager, overseeing our bulletin, our website, and our quarterly newsletter, all of which needed work, but also to write press releases, to try to get the story of not only our parish, but the Catholic Church out to a larger audience, which was proving to be difficult at times. So all these different kinds of things. And finances have gone up, which is always a great measuring stick for the bottom line, and something pastors love to hear. We made a simple little appeal about a year ago and have really found that the last 2 months, April and May, were our best all-time revenues. I
think people are investing in what they really believe in.
That's it. The basic, and Kerry Robinson taught me this, the idea that people in Catholic philanthropy people see what's going on, they want to invest in it, they want to be part of that. And so that's what we did. Our challenge, one of our teams has just about disintegrated, and that's our social outreach team. Interestingly enough, we had loads of outreach ministries, and they're operating. They're keeping on going. They haven't stopped. But the overseeing group, to coordinate that with the larger strategic plan of the parish, we couldn't engage people. So we're in the process of rebuilding it. The pastoral associate who was in charge of it, in fact, retired. So we also need to replace somebody as far as...
Got a local CEO who jumped in and is going to actually run that.
He's going to do that. So this is when you try to explain something like this, it sounds like, oh yeah, this is the next best thing to sliced bread here. There are flaws in it. It hasn't been without difficulty. It hasn't been without some struggle, and there haven't been pieces that aren't put together yet. This being one of them. And we are proud that we are partners in excellence with the Leadership Roundtable on church management, and really make good use of that as well in all of our working. So, do you have something else to say?
No.
Oh, here's Carrie.
Excellent. So first, let me lead the crowd in a round of applause. I know everybody wants to join their parish now. This is the problem with this. So we have about 25 minutes for questions, reactions to this model. The floor is open. Yes, please. Oh.
Hey, Father Jim Dubik, I just wondered how you share this success with your fellow pastors, and if there is any interest in what you've done and the success that you've had.
Yeah. Nothing directly yet. Some of the pieces of it we've worked into one of the convocations that our diocesan presbyterate had several years ago. But there hasn't been anything really direct. One of the things we're doing with this is we're going to have our new communications person write up a presentation and get some publicity around both in our Catholic newspaper and in the local newspapers about, again, a Catholic parish doing something like this, interested in working in this fashion and having a more collaborative style of leadership. So hopefully that'll work it up. We'd like to, we're in the midst of a little transition. We just have a new bishop, and so we're kind of easing into things. But I think it's a wonderful thing, because we unfortunately, I think, sometimes waste opportunities when we do our convocations on topics that nobody really cares about, and guys end up not going. So how about having something on, you've been wrestling with what parish council is? Let's try this, or do something more substantial. Thanks. Please.
Hello, Father. I'm Bill O'Connell from Phoenix. From your perspective as a priest and what you know about bishops who run dioceses, what would you think might be the reasons why they would resist being open to adopting standards of excellence, both at a diocesan level or at a parish level?
Right. If memory serves, one of the real challenges that the founders of the Leadership Roundtable had when it first started was the wariness of certain church leaders that you were trying to tell us how to do church. Now you're going to start to tell us about theology, et cetera, et cetera. So there was a wariness that, because again, the church, if human change is difficult, as someone stated earlier, human change within a 2,000-year institution that has prided itself on, but we've always done it this way, is a little more challenging all the more. So, but once, and I believe it was the work that the Roundtable did in consulting with the Archdiocese of New Orleans, once they saw the results of it, helping them to rebuild their Catholic school system down there, they saw that this is effective. I think then they say, okay, maybe these standards of excellence are worth adopting more. But I think the word has to get out. That's again where that PR piece of our plan has been so important, whether it be with other priests or throughout the diocese or kind of the bishops among themselves. I mean, it's wonderful that Archbishop Kurtz is so committed to that. Who does he tell about what went on here? And the word starts to get out. I think they look for that. Thanks.
Hello.
Hi.
Fred Fosnack from My Catholic Voice. I don't know if this is for you or for Paul, but I think many of us would be interested in understanding how you discerned, or as they say in Kentucky, how you distill, the priorities of the implications. Because I think my own trepidation in entering into a process like this is you get a bag full of every good idea that very well-intentioned people have. And so trying to prioritize that, filter that, discern really what is
It's good.
what you should
That's a
be
good
about?
question. So remember the laws of real estate, linkage, linkage, linkage? So what we did when we got to the key issues, and this is what we do in the corporate world, one of the things Father Joe talked about was Sandy Hook. We helped the Sandy Hook group as an extension of our church organize a nonprofit for the families. We use this methodology. So they were in the same boat. What are the priorities that we have? So we went back to the data, and we basically said, so if you remember that chart that had internal, external analysis, we looked at the organization and looked at everything such as finances, number of committees, number of parishioners. And then outside, we looked at what's going on outside in the community. What's going on, what's the biggest crisis we have in this town? We had at the time, there was in addition to the economy, there was a wrath of young people dying from drugs and suicide in our community. So there were things that were immediate, so we linked all our decisions back by saying, what did the data tell us that was the most important thing that we should really be focusing on? And we let that help guide our decision. Here's the evidence. And we had 20-some, like I said, key issues. We whittled it down to 7 or 8. And we said, these what we believe, if we tackle these things. And by the way, we said if the 55 ministries could fold up and roll up under each one of these teams, there would even be more, and there's a more connection to the teams. It was connection internally, what we were good at, and externally, what the community needed. So we went back, all the way back to our data and looked and said, okay, if this is a process and we followed it right, it should automatically tell us where we need to go.
And the presupposition, too, was we can't do everything. We have limited resources, we have limited time, and we have limited energy. What do we want to really commit ourselves to if we're going to stay faithful to the mission of the parish and the mission of the church? And as Paul had mentioned earlier, it's those choices, and that's tough. It's really a hard thing. I was real grateful that we had somebody as skilled as Paul, you know, to kind of talk the language and kind of be able to guide this process from the standards of excellence and the processes that he knew from his corporate life, and to use them in the parish. But it's no easy balancing act.
And sometimes it's a launch and learn. You know, you go with, like we said, the social outreach. That was one of the big priorities, and we found a lot of that falling up under the other ministries or other teams. So it's a conversation and debate and dialogue, and going back to what the information, the process should help kick out what those are.
Hi, Kevin Kiley, Archdiocese of Boston. Question and then a comment. Do you have a finance committee in addition to the financial stability group, and how do those two interact? And then secondly, I've never understood why we mandate finance councils but not parish councils, because there's a fundamental disconnect. We have a lot of affiliates in the Archdiocese of Boston that have boards of trustees. And they have specialties. Each one of those trustees has a specialty, and there's groups and subcommittees, and they all work together. But at the parish level, you have the finance council or the finance committee that sort of runs the show. And the pastoral council sort of out on the side, and they're just kind of looking at adding mission type of things. And the finance committee's like, no, we don't have the budget for that, or we're trying to save money. I just don't think it's a good way to run.
If you look at this chart here on the scope and objectives, that might help. Provide finance council with strategic information, two-way communication. Father, you're on both. You could talk about how they interact and work together also.
A couple of the members of the financial stability team are finance council members. So there's that link automatically. Because again, like you mentioned, the finances become such a nitty-gritty part of any movement forward that you're going to do. And so the financial stability team, though, they're not just to the point of like finance council, you know, creates the budget, does all this kind of thing, stays on top of spending, buildings and grounds, all these kinds of things. But these folks are connected with the vision of where we're going with all this, and to keep the financial piece connected to you know, to the plan. So
it's a good question.
It's a delicate thing. I share your thing. I was, when kind of even looking back and preparing for the talk, I was, you know, looking at the different documents of the church that gave rise to parish councils, and it is still just a suggestion, as opposed to we got to have that finance council. Yes?
From the future and Archdiocese.
That's right. It's down.
Archdiocese of Philadelphia, sorry. Congratulations on all your success. It's fantastic. And to see a pastor quoting Larry Bossidy is just a game changer, I have to say. But one question I had, you talked about the finances. How did this impact stewardship or your weekly offertory? Did you see a dramatic uptick since you've done such a great job engaging the laity and their time and their talent? I would assume that the treasurer kind of followed naturally.
Right, it did, because one of the pieces that we did, and it came out of a suggestion from the financial stability team, is to get people to think in terms of monthly contribution, as opposed to paying for going to Mass. And if I don't happen to go to Mass next week because there's a snowstorm or I'm sick, I don't pay to go to Mass. To have people think about that. We had initiated online giving, as many parishes have, and a certain amount of people, really went on to that. But a lot of people were very wary of that as well. So we just did a presentation where we offered to the parish several options: the online giving, or just having it automatically withdrawn from your checking account or whatever. And I forget what the third one was. There was some, or just for themselves take an envelope and give one donation a month. And that was what they were donating. And think of it in terms of, you're allotting so much for your mortgage and your kids' education and household expenses. Put the church in there somewhere and let that be your commitment. So it was, and it did give rise, as I said, as we moved in that direction and were more purposeful about it, coming out of the financial stability team, that we've had our best, last 2 months have been best months that we've had since my time there. I've been there 11 years, yeah.
One of the things, the Haiti team is more or less self-funded. So if somebody sees part of this plan, something they want to invest in, they can choose to invest. I think they have a commitment of $56,000 that are building schools and health clinics down there. So we made that clear too. Some of these things, this is where your money goes, kind of transparent.
And that philanthropic principle, I think, is really, really sound. When people see something good going on, they want to be part of it, If it's just the same old, they won't. Okay.
Other questions?
I'll ask a follow-up on Haiti. You said 7 years ago, you wanted to change the relationship with the parish. Mm-hmm. How'd you do?
Well, pretty good. We're really limited. I think in our more idealistic moments, we thought, wouldn't it be great if a family could adopt a family, and then maybe they would go down on one of the immersion trips and visit them, or the Haitian family could come up here. Our parish in Haiti is about an hour and a half north of Port-au-Prince. It's in a very, very rural, poor area. One central church, 7 missions, and 1 priest who gets to each of the missions several times a year. U.S. law does not allow Haitian immigrants to come to this country. There's some kind of a visa question that's involved there. So the only one we bring the pastor up every year, and he comes. It's one of our big fundraisers is a gala for Haiti we do in the fall. He's always here for that weekend, and then he speaks French and a little English, as well as Creole, so he speaks at all the masses with an interpreter. So people are visually connecting with this man. We have a big bulletin board outside that every immersion trip, we have three immersion trips, or 3 trips down there every year, and when they come back, they bring a whole new set of, and it's pretty much half of one of our big bulletin boards in the gathering space with the pictures of what's going on. The other thing that we initiated was prayer partners. We took pictures of people in our parish who were willing to be a prayer partner with somebody down there. And when the immersion trip went down, they took pictures of those prayer partners and gave them the picture of one of our parishioners. We got the picture of them, and we asked the people to be united in prayer. The limitations of not being able to get there, and especially the language limitations. Creole is not an easy language, and Rosetta Stone doesn't even have it, so you can't really get a real handle on it, so the communication is going to be real limited. So we're still struggling with that, but looking for little ways to make it more relational and to get away from the sense that, we're the, the wealthy Americans and we're going to do something for these poor Haitians who have nothing. We believe they have something to offer us. And to listen to people when they come back. They always do a witness thing at one of the Sunday liturgies when they come back, the group, with some pictures and stuff like that. And it just really grabs people. And to hear their personal reflections and then have other people react to it.
I think one of the things we didn't mention, early on when we first started meeting and we were wrestling, we went through a lot of pizza as the group was meeting. And we had a conversation about what happens if Father Joe leaves? What happens if he gets sick? We said, okay, we need to think about that while we're putting this together. Can this sustain Father Joe's absence? And he decided to go on a 4-month sabbatical. And we kept going. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was... We put on the front, we took the picture off the front of the bulletin and put a question on the front of the bulletin. How can we be church if we don't have a resident pastor? And that every week came up just to raise that question for people, that it wasn't just about, the priest didn't necessarily even have to be there. They could still be the people of God. They could still do the mission of the church. They could still keep that going. But I went off on sabbatical to San Antonio and came back afterwards, and the plan was still going, and the parish was still going. They sent a priest in to help and say masses, but basically the parish ran itself, which was a good experience. And actually the work that we had done here, and by that time being pretty committed into the plan, helped to sustain it too.
Where have you seen the greatest impact on using the standards in your parish? A couple examples of where the standards for excellence have made the greatest impact.
Okay. I'd say the whole question of accountability, for starters, accountability to the larger group. When we come together as that group, we just had this at the end of May. We had our third meeting, or our last meeting this year, and people around the table, the chair of each team, told what they had done. And the idea was that they were accountable to the rest of the group there, which really symbolized the larger parish. So a certain sense of accountability. The financial transparency, we've done a lot with that in our reporting to the parish to keep them on top of it. And the idea, I think, even of tapping people who have skill sets. That it's not just, this is a nice person who's got a lot of good intentions, real committed to the parish, but how about somebody who has these skill sets to look for them to take leadership in different ways? Those would be a couple of things that come to mind right away. Paul, you got any?
Yeah, we passed out the Standards of Excellence booklet when we first started, and everybody read it and came back and said, what ideas or thoughts can we take from here to make sure that informs our work? And the whole operational management discipline and having some sort of structure in place, I think, was helpful as much as anything. What are the structures, the disciplines you have in place to run a parish? And it's also served as a checklist when we go back and saying, are we still adhering to this? And so the management discipline, the fact that we needed a plan, and we had the ability to do that. And so I think as much as anything, that and accountability. It's almost shifted from who's accountable to what you're committed to. And there's a fine line, I think, between accountability and commitment, because you are accountable for delivering on what you have to do as a team leader, but you're committed to the other 7 members of the Pastoral Advisory Council, and you commit not to let them down and to help each other out. And so it's somewhat magical the way it's really formed the way we get together.
Before you did the plan, how did you operate? And did you have to unlearn anything as a pastor to work with your parish community in this way? What have you learned about why this is an important way to work?
Sure. I like to think I've always operated collaboratively. I worked in seminaries for a long time and lived in small communities with guys, and there was this idea of personal accountability one to another. So I like to think that I carried that over into the parish, What has the big difference for me, and it's comes from two directions. One, from being a part of the Roundtable over the years, and secondly, working with a skilled professional like Paul in approaching this. What do you have to do to make this happen? And it was less, you know. I have a diocesan, a priest in our diocese, wise old man. He says that clericalism is like the pattern in the wallpaper in the room. You don't notice it, but it's there all the time. And I've been a priest 42 years. I was raised in that church. So as much as I'd like to think I'm kind of a Vatican II kind of guy, I think there was still little remnants of that going on, you know, but I'm the pastor. And really working with people who really were very committed to the parish, and like I say, people who had skill sets, people who really knew things about this stuff that I had no idea about. I had to depend upon somebody else. I mean, I couldn't have done this without Paul. So combining those two things were good. Yes, Jim?
Oh, there you go. Can I ask the same question of Paul? If you could speak on behalf of parishioners, what do you think the parishioners have seen different
since we've done this?
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing is, well, first of all, more focused. When we would do something before, if an event came out or an initiative, it wasn't always clear on what that was on behalf of. That's number one. Number two is, I think the biggest thing is it's a collaborative model to do church differently. What's the role of the laity in our parish? Was a big aha for a lot of people. So even the people on the planning committee, I think that's probably the biggest thing. What is our role? It's our church. You know, it's our, you know, Father Joe's there, and we don't have to run. And I think you could probably quantitatively talk about the number of times people come and ask you for permission to do something now.
Right. I mean, that still comes up. So giving people an experience that they are the church. Paul had mentioned before that of the 7 teams, all of the teams are connected with and several already existing parish ministries, except today's church. And that's one that I liaison with. So we didn't have an automatic agenda. Oh, you know, there's this committee or this ministry that's doing what you were doing, and you know, and you work with them and that. We took as one of our, because we're supposed to raise the level of consciousness that we are the church, and to help people communicate that better. That's why our big thing has been these conversations. Let's get people talking about their faith. Let's not avoid some of the dicey issues about our Catholic faith. Let's talk about that and come to understand some of these things a little bit better. Let's talk to your neighbor. I mean, again, we are the Northeast. We have a lot of people who come in from outside there who retired to Southbury, but we are by and large Northeasterners. And we Northeasterners, especially we Irish Catholics, don't talk about our faith and our internal life a lot. So it really is bringing that up, making it more normal. And as we modeled that, I think, I mean, we still have a long way to go with that, but I think that's a good tactic that we'll use.
You know, there's one clear example, too. In the height of the Great Recession, we had a lot of people that were out of work in our parish, and a lot of them would run to Father, you know, counseling, what do I do? And so we set up, as part of the Pastoral Care Committee, we set up a career transition ministry. And myself and somebody else who had worked in HR got it up and running. We have 10 to 15 people that attend this every month for the last 2 years. And now they don't have to go to Father. Well, they do probably for other stuff, but we can help them with networking, job. We have an 80% success rate with that, too, of placing people in jobs. And alumni come back. And actually, people who are not members of our parish, one of the things that we said, we're part of this community. We want to be known for what we do with this community. So we have a lot of people who are not Catholic who come in. Father was telling me today, because we have a lot of people that come to Mass that aren't Catholic. And they just want to be part of this experience here in Southbury. But that's an example of it's laity taking on a bigger role in the parish. That's one concrete example, I think.
Another one is that Stephen ministry. Again, you have a 2,200 household parish. There's a lot of things where people had formally talked to the pastor about. because he was the one who was a skilled pastoral leader, et cetera. We now have 36 and growing skilled, trained people who can be with people in those situations. So it's no longer just a clerical role. It's really, and it's not just the professional religious leaders on the pastoral team. We have these other people in the parish who now have a role in this, and people can turn there too.
So I'm going to give the last question to Tom Healy, who's hidden behind this column, but has been raising his hand.
I'll unhide. I don't mean to, this is fabulous, and you've got us all excited, and I know both of you from past years, and that just increases the excitement. But I do have one very serious question, and it's, Father Joe, when you're named Archbishop of Chicago, what happens to this model when another priest comes in as pastor? And what's the risk?
Good question.
Of it either falling apart, or the next priest doesn't like it, and really confusing hell out of the people.
That's really true, and it is the issue that faces all parishes and all dioceses and things like that. My hope is that people can take on this model, this image, this role that they have as the people of God more and more and more. So, and I hang on there, you know, and continue it and try to really embed it in people. That if somebody came in and tried to radically change that, and I know I'm talking idealistically here, but that they would somehow, and I would hope appropriately, you know, put forth, you know, this is the way we've been doing it. We believe this. We've got some background in this, that, and the other thing, having done it. The church teaches thus and such about what the church is. We're trying to follow that model, et cetera. Somehow get into the dialogue with somebody who would come in, but it's a risk. It's one of the saddest parts of priesthood is to know that you could pour out life's blood for in a parish or a ministry somewhere, and the minute you're gone, it could all be changed, because by and large in the church, the priest has all the power. I think that's changing. I hope it's changing, and I think that's going to hopefully respond to this situation that the priests talk about all the time.
I would basically say first rule is challenge assumptions. Let's look and find out what's work. If there's something that somebody new comes in and we need to tweak it, but I think we got so much momentum in our parish that, you know, I think something would change probably, but hopefully all the good we've done would be a track record of success.
Well, I want to thank you, Paul and Father Joe, for this wonderful example. I've had the great privilege of visiting your parish on a number of occasions, and the palpable sense of invitation and welcome, the active participation of the full community is just stunning. I mean, it really is how parish life should be. We are incredibly proud that the Standards for Excellence formed a basis for this strategy, and echoing back to this morning's discussion, I want to challenge everyone to be imaginative and help us figure out how we can package the Standards for Excellence and this process to reinvigorate all 18,000 to 19,000 parishes in the country. So thank you very much for being with us today.